Creative Tech Podcast. Hi, I'm Kaori Ray, product designer and author. Our mission is to help people in their career and lives by sharing their creative and technology stories. Okay, let's get started.
Don't try, darling.
Okay, morning, Martin.
Good morning, Kaori.
Good morning. What time in Hong Kong now?
It's 7:20 in the morning.
Sorry, and thank you so much for your precious morning time for our interview today.
No worries. I'm totally hyped and excited. So no sleepy days for me.
Yeah, so please imagine there are many our audience too excited to hear about your journey. So could you please introduce about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Martin. I'm from Berlin, and I'm working as a CEO for Asia Berlin. Asia Berlin is a project by the Berlin government to connect the Berlin startup ecosystem, which is awesome, with the startup ecosystems of Asia. The background in this is a little bit that, if you go to German startups, pretty much any startup in the world, the first startup ecosystem that they think out of their home country is the United States and the Silicon Valley. What we think in Europe is that there are other interesting markets too. Especially from Berlin side, we think that Asia is a huge market. Actually, Asia is as a matter of fact, is 50% of the world economy. So we should be looking to Asia. And 27 years ago, the Berlin government has made the decision to make Berlin a part of Asia and has started the Asia Berlin project, which resulted into a really nice conference, actually. It started off under a little bit different name. The name used to be Asia Pacific Weeks, but now changed into Asia Berlin. So the biggest activity that Asia Berlin is doing is the Asia Berlin Summit. And the Asia Berlin Summit is a conference 5 days in Berlin, bringing together the startup ecosystems from Berlin with the ones of Asia. We have the conference happening in the mayor's office directly, so in the Berlin town hall, very centrally located in the center of Berlin. And the mayor himself is actually opening the conference, which is pretty cool because that brings us a political level that is significant to get in like very important stakeholders from all over the world, especially Asia. But very, very quickly, within like half a day, we are actually really going down to working level and have startups talking about startups issues, no longer neckties and suits. We are hoodies in the mayor office. Then on the third day, we have ecosystem tours. So what we do there is we help our Asian delegations to experience the startup ecosystem in Berlin firsthand. So we have like bus tours going through Berlin, and they usually have like topics. So last year, for example, we had 3 topics: AI, mobility, and green tech. And this year we're going to have something probably similar. And then you, as a let's say Asian startup or Asian ecosystem builder, can then be driven through Berlin and experience those innovation spaces that are relevant for the respective area. And then the last 2 days we are open for satellite events. So that there we invite like all kinds of partners that can be the ecosystem builders of Berlin. So innovation spaces, sector specific areas, but also country specific areas. So like, for example, we have often the embassies of the Asian countries doing their own events in their embassies. We also have innovation spaces running events for, let's say, quantum or for AI computing or chip manufacturing or mobility or green tech sectors or things like that. So quite exciting week. Come to Berlin. This year it's actually a little bit special even because usually we're running it in summer. This year it's our first Christmas edition. And it's starting on the 25th of November for 1 week, so 25th to 29th of November. And the 25th is also the day where the Christmas markets in Berlin are opening. So I know Asians really like Christmas markets, and we are in the mayor's office. So right in front of the mayor's office, we have a beautiful Christmas market. So you come out and you go right in.
Amazing. Cool. Okay, so it's November.
Correct. November 25 to 29.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so Martin, I have a lot of questions.
Actually, there's a little perk. So if you or anybody else from Asia comes, then please don't forget the week before is Slush in Helsinki. So another really big international startup convention.
Yes.
So you're gonna go to Slush, then you have the weekend off to fly to Berlin, and then you do the Asia Berlin week. So you have like two really interesting and big ecosystem players in the startup field in Europe in one trip.
Amazing. I love that. Okay, Martin. So there, in Europe, there are many big cities. And then could you please tell us why Berlin is special? Berlin startup ecosystem is like stand out compared to other cities.
Yes, I can definitely tell you that. Basically, if you look into Europe, especially from market entry perspective for Asian startups, you would think about the big ones first, right? So what you usually do is you pull up the charts and you figure out like, okay, in Europe, the biggest venture capital is basically spilled out in the UK, in London. So London is definitely Europe's #1 venture capital town. The #2 is Paris, and the #3 is Berlin. So those are usually your top ranked cities in Europe. So let's compare London, Paris, and Berlin. Starting with London, it's true, it has like the major amount of venture capital, but it has so it is actually very relevant in the startup space, and especially now here I'm in Hong Kong. You know, they're very UK focused. I can see that a lot of international startups are still going to UK to running their ventures. However, you have to keep in mind that the UK now is not EU anymore. So yes, you come to Europe, but you are on an island and you are not inside the EU. That is kind of significant because in Europe, you have actually a lot, or inside the EU, you have certain regulations that can help you. Like, for example, there is a regulation called passporting. Passporting means you have a license in one EU country, and then you can use this license in all other member states. So meaning, like, for example, you have a banking license in Germany, then you can use this bank anywhere else in the EU to run your business, which means you don't need to go through all of these steps, these licensing steps in all of the member states. if you have a banking license in UK, it doesn't mean that you can play in the inside the EU. So for certain businesses, it can be interesting, especially if you are like highly venture capital driven. You need like high capital to run your startup. Then London might be interesting for you. If you are looking for things that you want to roll out in the rest of Europe as a market, London might not be your first choice, and especially if you're hardware. Because as a hardware startup, you have supply chain issues, and supply chain, you don't want to do cross-border, so that doesn't really make it doesn't help you to be outside of the EU, and therefore you don't really want to be on the island. So that's stuff to consider for London. For Paris, it's a very, very interesting startup city in Europe. And as I said, like it's the highest one inside the EU if it comes to venture capital funding. But you have a significantly different, or like one big difference to Germany and Berlin. Germany is a pretty much decentralized country. So in Germany, we have many big cities. We have Berlin, which is the biggest one. It's got like 3.5 million inhabitants, which is small for Asia, but like really big for Europe. And on top of that, we have a lot of other cities that are significant. So everybody heard about Frankfurt, Munich, Hamburg, Cologne, like those. And those are areas that are like also economically very, very important. So Germany is just very decentralized, meaning like we have big companies everywhere, big corporates everywhere, and also startups everywhere. So that's why the venture capital of Germany is spilled out all over Germany. And 50% of that happens in Berlin. So if you just compare the venture capital, then a centralized state like Paris would have much higher venture capital than Berlin, because Berlin has to kind of like share with the rest of Germany versus Paris is very, very centralized. So Paris works the way you have Station F, right, which is the big startup hub in the middle of Paris, and that is super, super important. That's where all of the startup activities literally happening, but you don't have really anything much in the rest of the country. So that's why if you are a company that is looking for a market that is very centralized, and this is also in your DNA of your company, then Paris might be an interesting step into Europe. But if you are more of a decentralized matter also in your company DNA, then Berlin would be more interesting for you, because in Berlin you have one entry point and you can play with the rest of Germany's economy, especially when you do B2B. That is a very big, interesting consideration. The second very interesting difference between Berlin and Paris is that Berlin is a startup ecosystem that is entirely in English. So you will not, yes, we speak German in Germany, but you will not find a single meetup that is in German, not in the startup ecosystem space. If you go into industry, yes, or if you go into other sectors, but in the startup field, you can totally, as a non-German speaking founder, you can totally come to Berlin and found your company. That is very different in Paris, where you have to speak French in order to make a market.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much. Cool. So language barrier is so big for us. But yeah, many people can speak English, especially the startup meetup. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening our Creative Tech podcast today. We hope our story to help your career and life. See you soon. Bye bye!